Hi, Science Cores, and welcome back to 7th grade science. Last week, we learned a little bit more about the different layers of the atmosphere. And just to briefly go over those, the different layers we learned about was the troposphere, the stratosphere, the mesosphere, the thermosphere, and the exosphere, with the troposphere being the one that is close to us, and the exosphere being the one that is farthest away. I learned a cool acronym today about a way to remember these. Um, it was from a YouTube video I was watching from another scientist, and he suggested the acronym try some milk, then eggs, which is troposphere, stratosphere, mesosphere, thermosphere, and exosphere, but just their first letter. So that would be try some milk, then eggs. And I thought that was kind of cute. That may be a good way to remember them. But for today, I would like to go over some of the atmosphere basics with you so that we can learn a little bit more before we dive deeper into our unit. Today, we're going to learn about a little bit about the different elements that comprise our atmosphere and what they do for us. So first, welcome to our atmosphere. It's lovely. It's great. It has a lot to do with our daily life. Number one, it keeps us healthy. It protects us from danger, such as stray meteorites, and it produces much of the fascinating weather patterns that we see in our daily lives. Each day that you get to enjoy a sunny day, or sit by a window during a rainy day, or take a snow day sledding, is all because of our atmosphere. So it's pretty important to us. Our atmosphere is also interesting for us to study, especially in relation to space, because it is the thing that connects us to space. So think of the exosphere, which is the one at the very top, as a place where the air is very thin, but also where space begins to merge with our planet. One thing I often have a hard time thinking about is how our space actually connects to us. So you can think of the atmosphere as this kind of bridge that bridges the gap from us to there. So the atmosphere is only a thin layer of gases. Although it does a lot for us, it's not very much. It is very wide, it is very dense, there is a lot going on, but it's only made up of a few different gases. All of the layers of the atmosphere are made up of these gases, and think of them as all interacting with one another, and they all circulate around our planet. So the different spheres that we have learned about, the tropo, strato, meso, thermo, and exo, are all kind of dancing with one another, is a way to put it. And by dancing, what I mean is that they're constantly exchanging these different gases between them and going back and forth. So instead of thinking them as a strict layer, think of them as just a general area and what we call it. Kind of like when you think of the borders between states, such as North Carolina and South Carolina. Although these borders do define an area, both of them are still land. There's still places that we can visit. There's still roads and highways. There's still trees and grass. And that's kind of like the atmosphere too. No matter where you go in the atmosphere, you're going to encounter the elements that make up all of them. So the atmosphere is responsible both for the cool breeze that we feel on a crisp spring morning. So when you get up and the frost is still kind of out there, right after winter, but also the hot and humid days that we experience in the late months of summer. So kind of like the ones we're getting now, although it's starting to get a little chilly outside. But think of like late July, early August. The atmosphere is also responsible for the heat then. So the most important part about our atmosphere, at least to us, is that it keeps us safe. There are many things our atmosphere does to keep us safe, comfortable, and amazed with all the cool weather that we see. And some of these things are that it seals the planet and protects us from floating out into the vacuum of space, because honestly, who wants to have to do that? It also protects us from the electromagnetic radiation given off by the sun. So these electromagnetic radiation, these waves, are very, very dangerous to us. We get to walk outside and experience the cool earth that we have because our atmosphere kind of dilutes this. If we were to be touched by direct electromagnetic radiation, you could expect a very serious sunburn. And that is also why we get sunburns now. Sometimes when we're going to be outside for a long time, we want to wear sunscreen. And that's because although our atmosphere filters these electromagnetic rays, it can't filter them all. But it does filter enough of them that we do get to go outside and enjoy it. So that is a very important thing that the atmosphere does. Another thing it does is it holds the oxygen we are all able to breathe in. So if you see there, I have it denoted as O2, and we'll get into that later, but that is what we call breathable oxygen, or the oxygen that we're able to process in our bodies to keep us alive and healthy. The fourth thing is that it protects us from the stray meteorite, and it ensures that that meteorite would burn up before it crashes into our Earth. So no matter the size of the meteorite, it is going to burn in our atmosphere. Large meteorites may make it through our atmosphere, but most of the time, the meteorites that we encounter are very small, and they will burn before they make it to us. So the only things we experience are the little specks that come off of that burning. So our atmosphere, think of it as like a blanket. It ensures that we are safe, comfortable, happy, and healthy. Think of it also, another way to think of it is like a ceiling. It's a ceiling on top of our Earth. It's the ceiling on top of our building that keeps us safe from all these things. So, just like onions, the atmosphere has layers. I don't know how many of you have ever seen the cartoon movie, the animated movie Shrek. That's a good way to remember the atmosphere. Think of just like onions, the atmosphere has layers. In the same way that the earth has layers, and you guys have learned about it before, that we can go down in the earth and the different layers of soil have different names, so does the atmosphere. The lowest layers, which would be our troposphere and our stratosphere, interact with the surface of our earth, and they're the ones that we see most frequently in our daily lives. So this can be the weather, this can be the biomes that we live in. That's the lowest layers. However, as technology and commerce has grown, especially the economy, many businesses and scientists have reached out to be able to grow our abilities to reach to greater heights. So this would be us entering the mesosphere or the thermosphere or even the exosphere on space expeditions. And the farther we get along in technology, the more we expand into these regions. So it's also important for us to learn about these. These are the highest layers within space, and they are seen only by the people or the astronauts that dare to voyage there. So for most of us, we've never seen these layers with our own eyes, but it still is important for us to study about them. And here is a little graphic of these different layers. So as you can see here, we have the troposphere down here at the bottom. So this can oftentimes intersect with our different mountains and our clouds. We have the stratosphere, which is our next layer. But right before the stratosphere, if you look here, this is an ozone layer. This is what we call good ozone, and it's very important to us in keeping us safe. And it comes right before the stratosphere. So we have ozone here, then stratosphere. After the stratosphere, we have the mesosphere. Think of the mesosphere as kind of the middle. So this is the middle of our atmosphere. It is also where our coldest layer is. So air and other elements are very cold here. Most of the time, this will be where meteors are before they enter in and burn. This can be where sprites are. This can be where these clouds are, which are very high clouds, as well as sounding rockets. And then we have the thermosphere. And the thermosphere is our largest layer. Even though it doesn't look like it here, it is. It is our largest layer. And it's also the layer right beside what the exosphere would be, which would be up here. Now, one more thing I forgot to point out that I would like to point out to you guys is every once in a while in the stratosphere, this is where weather balloons can fly to. So sometimes weather balloons enter our stratosphere, but it's basically the only thing from our regular lives that go this far. So one thing I would like to touch on very quickly, one thing very interesting, is that when I say oxygen, I am not talking about this oxygen here, but instead I'm talking about this oxygen. So this is what we would call dioxygen or breathable oxygen. So when you hear people saying things like, I breathe oxygen, what they're mostly talking about is dioxygen, which means it has this bond here between these two O molecules. And you may have seen these two O elements on your periodic table. This is an oxygen by itself. We cannot breathe regular oxygen. Pure oxygen is not something we can breathe. Pure oxygen in its elemental form is something that is known for starting or aggravating fires. So oxygen combined, we breathe, but regular oxygen may start fires, as well as dioxygen can too if this molecule is broken. That's something we call breaking the bond. So if this bond is broken and these O's are alone, they can also start fires. So it would be bad if our atmosphere was made of pure oxygen, of course. I'm sure everyone can agree there. And it's good that it's not, because if it was, we could expect a lot of things to start catching on fire, which is a big yikes. So our atmosphere is made up of several elements from the periodic table. Some of these elements you may have heard of last year in science, you may have seen on the periodic table, which I have one here. Some of them you may not know so well, so we're going to go through them. The different elements we can expect for our atmosphere to be created of and for our different layers to have in them is oxygen, nitrogen, radon, argon, hydrogen, helium, and carbon dioxide. So when we think of the atmosphere, what we think of a lot is oxygen and nitrogen, because those are both the main ones that we see. However, these other ones are there too. And aside from them, we sometimes can find trace gases in our atmosphere that have clung to molecules such as water and kind of sneaked in there. But these are our main few that we're really going to focus on, with oxygen and nitrogen being the most important. But it's also good to know that radon, argon, hydrogen, helium, and carbon dioxide are also present. So nitrogen is a very important element and one I would like to talk about with you. Nitrogen is more important to us than most of us know, or even for the ones of us who do know, we usually don't think about it. We usually think about oxygen when we think about essential to life, but nitrogen is also essential to our life. So for one, nitrogen is a building block of life, and it is found in our DNA. It is essential to plant growth and the food we grow. So not just plants as far as trees and flowers and grass, although it's important there, it's also important to our food. Without it, we would not have access to the water we drink, the air we breathe, or the life we live. So it's very important to us. In excess, though, sometimes you can have too much of a good thing. It can be harmful to our environment, but without it, we would not be able to continue to function as we currently do. So don't disregard nitrogen when we're talking about atmosphere. Remember that it's there, because without it, we would not continue to live the glorious lives that we do. But it's also going to become important to us later in this semester as we start to talk about DNA. So don't let it slip your mind. For the atmosphere, we can try to think of it as a greenhouse, or as the ceiling to the greenhouse, I mean. So our Earth is like a greenhouse, but our atmosphere is the ceiling to that greenhouse. So if the atmosphere is a ceiling, it protects the groups inside and also gives them room to grow. So think of these as groups of vegetables, of fruits, of plants. It protects these plants and gives them room to continue to grow and flourish in their lives. When we think of the atmosphere as a ceiling, though, then we can think of the glass as these essentials that hold it together. And this is the carbon dioxide, which is created by us on Earth and the different processes happening on Earth, as well as the water vapor, which is very important and essential to both our water cycle and our weather. So now that we've gone through some of the basics, I would like you guys to take a moment and just think about how the atmosphere impacts your life. Think of the different things you're able to do in your day-to-day life that the atmosphere is directly responsible for. How would things be different if you lived on another planet, like Mars? Let's think of Mars. Mars has an atmosphere, but it is very thin and very weak in comparison to our own. So if you were to move to Mars today, how would your life be different? And these are the questions I'm going to leave you off on. There'll be a few things for you guys to do in Canvas for the rest of the day, but I wanted to start here and talk about some basics. And keep your mind on these basics as you go through the activities in Canvas today. And think about how it impacts your life, how it's important to us, and the different things we're going to talk about for the rest of our atmosphere unit.